Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Coffee Chat. Today, we are celebrating a huge milestone. This is the launch of Kedro 1.0 and Kedro Viz 12.0. And as you might see in all the social media, our motto was stable at the core, ready for more. And to mark the occasion, we've got a very special guest, which is our tech lead, Meryl, who played a huge role in marking this release, making it happen, and she will walk us through what's new, what has changed, and what to expect next. As usual, to remind you about the format, we make our coffee chats public. They usually happen every other week. And here at the page, you can refer to all the previous coffee chats, the recordings, and see how to contact us in case you have follow-up questions. And as usual, at the end, we'll have some time to talk to you. So get ready with your questions and grab your coffee, enjoy the presentation. So I'll hand over to Meryl and yeah, enjoy it.
Great. Thank you so much, Elena. And hi, everyone. Super excited to be here to talk about the big launch of Kedro 1.0 and all the great updates we've done to the ecosystem. So let's get started with a bit of slides. I know in the rules we say no slides, but this is a special version. There will also be live demos, so do please stay for that. But yeah, Kedro 1.0. I want to spend a bit of time to talk about what this means and why we did it. Then we'll go into the demo part and I'll show the feature highlights. It's not all that's part of 1.0, but a couple of things. Then there will be some thank yous, because obviously there was a whole team behind this effort. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's next, because this 1.0, it doesn't mean we're retiring. We're still here, and we have a lot more to bring you. So first of all, Kedro 1.0 is here. This is really a massive milestone for the whole Kedro team and all the people that have worked on Kedro over the years. For people who are maybe a bit newer to Kedro, you might not realize it's been around for quite a while, and this milestone is really a testament of the craft and the work that has gone into Kedro over the years. It's been an effort, of course, of the core team, but also our community in testing our features, validating them, and giving us feedback to make sure that Kedro is the best version it can be. And I truly believe that this 1.0 is that best version at this point in time. It's really a celebration of all the big features that are now a robust, cemented, stable version. But it's also a milestone that marks a point that releases us a little bit in terms of, we know that this is the stable part, and we can continue evolving the full ecosystem. And it's also a point in which we are going to pivot and be a bit more experimental and creative and figure out what's next for Kedro. But stay tuned, because I'm talking about that more at the end of this presentation. First, I actually want to dive a bit into history. I have shown this slide to the team quite a bit this year, because I think it really does tell a story about Kedro and the type of product it is. And it also really explains why it makes sense to have a 1.0 version now. So back in the day, before I was even part of Kedro, there was a version of Kedro called Carbon. Unfortunately, all the code of this is gone, so we cannot trace it back. But this was basically the very first idea of what Kedro could be. And it was a foundation of a couple of features that are still existing today. After Carbon, we actually had a Carbon 1.0. So there was a moment in time where we thought that was a stable version. But then we changed and renamed it to Kernel AI. And this version of Kedro was really just the project template. It had a couple of library components, a run.py and a makefile, but that was all it was. It really wasn't a framework yet. It was a tiny little library. And users used it a lot to substitute things and use their pipeline extraction and some other tools. And so it felt a little bit of a bundling of scripts that were useful for data scientists and data engineers. But it didn't really feel like the framework it is today. It had some opinions, but it wasn't opinionated in any way. And it was very much like an idea still at this time. Then entry Kedro. So again, name change from Kernel AI to Kedro. And this is starting to look like the Kedro you know. This is also the version of Kedro 0.14 that was open sourced in 2019. And it's also a moment in time when we started to think about how we actually developed Kedro as a product. So we introduced the Kedro principles, which were inspired by the Zen of Python, and started to think about when we add features, like what should they be? Like what's the philosophy behind introducing certain changes and maybe rejecting some other changes? And how do we also make sure, now Kedro is open source, that we cater to a variety of users and don't only chase the ones that maybe shout a bit louder or have the biggest organization behind them. Then came 018 and 019, and this is really the evolution of Kedro as a framework. When we look back, we think Kedro kind of became a framework in 0.15, but that was like the first step. We introduced the context, the Kedro context that's still around. And this was really introduced to make it easier to access the library components when you were using Kedro in Jupyter Notebooks. Also a way to make Kedro more extensible. So this was when we started thinking about the context and the session and hooks were introduced, I think around 017. But the downside of some of the changes we made here was also that the framework became very coupled with the project template, and people started to realize they couldn't really use it on its own anymore. So in 19 was really paving a way to make a clear separation between framework and library, to make the use cases, to expand the use cases for Kedro, and also strengthen the features that were core part between those two. So with all that, we can kind of state Kedro is at least 7 years old. Yes, it has had a lot of different names, but it also has been around for a long time. So I think it also makes a lot of sense to have made this pivot and call it a stable version. Because I also wanted to show you a slide really from the archive. So this is at the time when it was still called Kernel AI. But this was literally, I copy pasted this slide. So these were some of the features we were talking about when we were explaining what Kedro was. So we were already talking about product structure, and this is the template that we still have. For those of you who are very keen, you'll see that there are differences. I mean, at the time we had some directories for references and results, which don't exist anymore. I think the make file is not part of the template anymore either. So we have definitely polished it with your help, but it was there. So it was, well, we called it data abstraction at the time. And now, you know, this is the data catalog, but that was also already there way in the beginning. What you can see under pipelines is a very early version of Kedro Viz. It was, it's nothing compared to what it is now. It was just a tiny little front end. And now, of course, it's one of our core selling points in Kedro. And then, of course, there were the coding standards. Kedro is always meant to help people introduce best software engineering practices in their AI projects. That was core from the beginning, and it's still core now. But all this is to say, you know, a lot of the features that are now part of 1.0 were born basically very early on. And with your help, we've now crafted what we think is the best version of all these components into the 1.0 release. Another reason that to us really indicated that we were ready for this massive milestone was a change in our release cadence. So I mapped this out to kind of show how close releases used to be and how at some point the breaking changes that we needed to make reduced, and we were able to deliver a lot of features to you in a non-breaking way. So early days, you can see the 0.14, 0.15 release were only months apart. Then the 0.16 release also came very early on, then 17, all within like the span of not even 2 years. We had 4 major releases that all came with breaking changes. So people in those early years had to update their projects a lot, also needed our help, and sometimes questioned, is Kedro the best thing to use right now? And it's clearly not stable yet, and I still have pain when I'm migrating. Then 0.18 came along in March 2022, and I think I'm quite confident in saying that was one of our first very robust versions, and we were able to last more than, nearly 2 years actually, till 0.19. And that, to me and the team at the time, was really a sign, okay, if we manage to make the 19 release equally strong, deliver a lot of new features, but don't have the need to break anything, we might actually be ready for a 1.0. December 2023 brought that 0.19 version, and then actually I'd say December 2024 was when I started to realize, I think we're ready for 1.0. And that's when our PM Juanlu, my co-tech lead Rashida, our design lead Steph, we huddled together and we're like, shall we just go for it? And then our full team, they went full ahead and sped it up. I'm going to do the thank yous a bit later. But that's a bit of the story, and also why we felt like, it made sense to establish that 1.0. Our community has grown a lot. We're at 10,000 GitHub stars. And while you still need us to build things, you haven't really needed us to fix things so much. And it made sense to us to bring you this 1.0 so you can also rely on Kedro, because in the end, it's also a promise, right, to you that our core is stable. You can rely on this. You can build your projects on it. You can bring this to your clients, your organizations, and know that we're not going to make massive breaking changes for a while now. Cool. Well, with that, I think it's time for our feature highlights. So I'm going to be talking about the new data catalog, namespaces, the run-only missing feature, the new visualization of the run status, which is our Kedro Viz 12.0, and our documentation. So with that, I will switch to demo mode. Yes. Oh, there we go. So the first thing I'm going to be showing you is our new data catalog. The data catalog is one of our first ever features. And in this new version, we've tried to obviously not make any changes in the sense that it's going to massively break the way you're used to using the catalog. So the fundamentals are still the same. And if you use Kedro in your everyday work, you just do a Kedro run, you won't notice a lot of differences. However, under the hood, we made the API a lot more flexible to work with, and your catalog, as you can use it today, will be very familiar if you're used to using dictionaries in Python. So let me just open an IPython terminal here and show you what I mean. I think this is especially interesting for those of you who like playing around with your data in notebooks or IPython environments, and those of you who are interested in building plugins and need to maybe access the catalog in a different way. So when I just get our catalog there, you can see all the entries there. Now, if I want to fetch something now, I can do that in exactly the same way as you would fetch items from a dictionary. So I can just do, a get companies, and it will return to me the definition of this data set. We've also introduced lazy loading, which means that now this actually hasn't loaded anything yet. It will only start loading it when I need it. So let me just... Okay, thanks cursor for pre-filling that for me. When I actually load the data set itself, you can see it's now loading it from our dataset definition. And then when I use it, you can see I now have my data accessible like this. So I can very easily do some data exploration now. Another thing you can do if you want to play around with adding data sets while you're using it in memory, you can also do something like, I can add a data set that's my name, and I'll just add a list to it. And now when I call my catalog again, I can see it has added a new entry for Merrill, which is just a memory data set. And if I now load that again, it just returns that list to me. So it's much easier to work with your catalog than it used to be. And this is only one of the many things that we've changed. So do check out the release notes as well if you want to know what more is there. Moving on to the next changes we have made, and those changes are to our namespaces. So namespaces has been quite a challenging feature in terms of user adoption. The main reason is either people really got to namespaces because they understood what they could use it for, or they were a bit hesitant because they didn't really understand what it was for, and the API was pretty minimal. So we've done a lot of changes to make it easier to use and easier to validate as well. So one of the core things we've added, which is behind the scenes, there's now namespace validation to ensure that when you add namespaces to your pipelines, and I've done that actually to my example, so I've added the namespace to all of the 3 pipelines I have in my my spaceflight project. So this is based on the core spaceflights, but I've added a namespace to my data science one, DS, data processing, DP, and then reporting, RP. Just to give them an extra level of unit, as in a way of grouping them. And what we've added on top of this validation to ensure that when you are using namespaces, you actually create executable components, we've added a way of grouping your pipeline by namespace as well. And this comes in especially handy when you are doing deployments. So let me just demonstrate to you. Let's first inspect which pipelines we have. Okay, so we have a default reporting, data science, and data processing. Let me just save the default. Now what I can do, I can either group it by group nodes by none. And what happens then is that every node is then returned as a group. And this is how deployment with a lot of our deployment plugins work by default. So every node was grouped by itself and would be an executable unit. However, for those who know that resources are not always limited, are not unlimited, this might not be the best grouping. So you can also group your pipelines by namespace now, and this now returns only 3 groups instead of a group per node. So when you now map this to your deploy target, like whether it's Airflow or SageMaker or Databricks, you now have 3 executable units that are much more efficient when it comes to using your resources. So definitely have a look at that if you are interested in optimizing the deployment of your Kedro pipelines. With that also comes a new way of running namespaces. You might be used to running one namespace at a time. You can now do multiple. So you can do, for example, these 2, and it will just run the namespaces that I've specified. So it will run 2 of my pipelines now instead of 3. But you can imagine if you have 100 pipelines and you've namespaced a couple of them and want to execute them in different groups. This gives you a lot more flexibility now. Moving on to one of, I think, the most requested features ever in Kedro, which is run only missing, which essentially means when I'm running a pipeline and something goes wrong, I might not want to run everything, because it could be that half of my pipeline is successful, all the outputs have been created successfully, so it makes no sense to run all of that again. So we have added a new flag, which is called only missing outputs. And what this will do is run the only run the nodes that don't have any outputs persisted. So only running those nodes that are necessary to be run because it's missing output. So in this case, you can see when I run my full pipeline with Kedro run only missing outputs, it executes only 2 tasks. When I just do a Kedro run, it will do 9, if I remember correctly. Yes, it does 9. So this is a huge change in efficiency, and it will really help iterating of your pipelines quicker when things fail. Obviously, my pipeline now is successful, so what I can do is also just delete one of my intermediate outputs, and when I then run it again with my own run only missing outputs, you'll see it will just go from where it notices there's no output and only execute those. So in this case, it completed 3 tasks, and when I run it again, it will just do the 2 again. All right, then moving on. I know we're almost running out of time because we have so many features. Kedro Viz 12.0. It's part of our 1.0 release because 1.0 is not just for the core Kedro package, it's for everything in the ecosystem. And our Kedro Viz now has a new view for you, which is our run status view. So let me wait for that to pop up. There we go, which you can find in your navigation bar. Before we only had our flowcharts. Now we have this new icon to access our workflow. And this is a representation of your last executed run. So what it shows is which nodes were run just now. Because I executed it with run only missing, it only ran those nodes that were necessary to be run. The rest, is grayed out because they didn't need to run. So it really shows you a visual representation of what has happened in your last run. And as you can see, my run was successful, so I see a lot of green. It explains to me for my data sets the size, and for my nodes, how long it took to execute them. And then obviously, if there's something wrong, it will also display this. So if I just modify my pipeline a little bit, maybe mess something up. Yeah, let me just assert false in one of the nodes, and then when I do another Kedro run, it will fail. And then on your Viz sides, you will be able to see this very nicely represented in your runs workflow tab. So there you go. Now, instead of having to read through the logs, you immediately see where something went wrong, which was on this side. And when we click on it, we are able to expand the traceback and actually see what happened. So there was an assertion error because there's assert false. So this is really big game changer when it comes to running your pipelines and quickly debugging and seeing what's happening there. Then finally, to ramp it all up, is our new docs. So we have a completely redesign of our docs, powered by MK Docs, which will make it easier for us to bring you new docs, but hopefully also a better experience for you to navigate through it. It's obviously also available in dark mode for the people who prefer that. And you can find everything about Kedro in a better way, more easy to explore. Of course, our Kedro Viz and Kedro Datasets docs are there as well. Okay, that's it for now in terms of features. Please do explore the release notes and our docs to find more information and let us know what you think. Then very quick thank you to the fantastic team behind this. Quick shout out, to all of you: Hung, Laura, Sajid, Juan Lu, Ankita, Rashida, Elijah, Yelena, who's on the call here, Dimitri, Ravi, and Jitendra. They've worked so hard. Then not on the photo is also Steph, our design lead, and our fantastic TSC, Ivan, Yetu, Deepyaman, Joel, Marcin, Simon, and Yolan. Like, massive thank you for helping us craft these feature and validate them and test them. And also, of course, a huge thank you to our users, because without you, it would not have been possible to bring this version of Kedro. Please let us know what you think of the 1.0. If you have questions, feedback, or have ideas for where we should go next, do bring them. On the topic of what's next, as I said, we're not retiring. We are still continuing, and actually we're already full speed ahead in a lot of new topics. I won't go into deep details here, but you can always find on GitHub what we're working on, or contact us on Slack if you're curious to hear more. But our 3 core focus points at the moment are building Kedro with Gen AI. So making sure that your AI assistant that you're using to code actually knows about Kedro and doesn't hallucinate and give you a headache when it comes to building your Kedro projects. Then on the other side, there's building Gen AI with Kedro. So how can we play a role in your Gen AI pipelines in your projects, and make sure you can still leverage those best practices and create something that's actually robust and deployable. And then finally, we're looking into building with Kedro beyond experimentation and initial deployments. So for those people who are already there deploying Kedro at scale, how can we make sure your pipelines can be built even more efficiently? They can run more efficiently. You can maybe observe them and debug in a better way. So lots more to come. Do watch out on any channels, including, of course, YouTube, for our coffee chats when we talk about them. And with that, I'll end it, and I have a little bit of time for questions if there are any.
Thanks, Meryl. Amazing presentation. I want to add one little thing. We also have to give some credits to Nock, who I think we forgot to put on the slide. And since he was the part of our team for a very long time and did so many good things for us and still supporting us, we have to do it now.
Absolutely.
So with all of this, that was the end of the official part. So now it's a really good time to ask your questions in the channel, or in case you come up with something later, feel free to reach out in a Slack. We always happy to keep the conversation going. And yeah, from my side, I can only say one more time, thank you to Meryl for walking us through the history of Kedro all the way to today's big 1.0 milestone. And of course, thank you to the team. You've been amazing guys to work with. Yeah, questions? I've been trying to encourage people to ask them in the chat while you were talking, but unsuccessfully.
Well, I hope that's a sign that they're all over the moon with excitement and everything's super clear. And they're all trying it out now.
All right. Yep. We have a question from further. Yuri Fedotov, amazing job. Do you already have any major new features planned for the next year or two?
Wow, next year or two. We have a lot of ideas. I don't want to call them features yet, but we do envision a future basically where when it comes to building your pipelines, it will be much more easy. So integrate, like if we're thinking about Gen AI, right? We're imagining a future where while you're conversing with your assistant about building your pipeline, there's also a Viz version that updates on the go and allows you to, in the visual representation, continue building your pipeline. So it's like a double double experience, both in the UI as well as in your code. Then obviously we're also thinking of how we can make Kedro pipelines be executable by agents. So suppose you have a lot of pipelines and you want to use them in an extra project, but you don't want to think about, okay, which pipelines are useful. How about you can set up your agents in a way that they can access your Kedro pipelines and execute them for you. So a lot of thoughts there. But let us know if there's anything you need and would like us to build in the next year or two, because we as I said before, we cannot do it without our users.
Nice. And since we are a little bit running out of time, that wraps up today's Kedro Coffee Chat. Thanks a lot for your work and contributions and joining us today. And we'll see you at the next time. Have a nice Friday.
Thank you all.